Bismillah nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulih al-kareem. Amma ba'd. So inshallah today we will continue discussing Arabic grammar. We were discussing mansubat. We've discussed so far maf'ul mutlaq. So as a reminder, that was just a root noun which is in the meaning of the verb that precedes it, and it's used for emphasizing, showing what type of verb it is, or showing the amount of times that action occurred. We discussed maf'ul bihi, and within maf'ul bihi we discussed the rulings such as when a verb is mentioned, sometimes a verb is not mentioned, and that led on to the discussion of munada, the vocative noun, and we discussed the i'rab of the munada, the ismu munada. We said sometimes it's halatul rafa when it's mufrad and mabni. We said sometimes it's makhfud, so it's majroor when alam istighatha precedes it. Sometimes it has a fatha when there's an alif after it, like ya zayda. It's mansub, we said, when it's mudaf ilay, ya abdallah, or similar to mudaf, usually at the mumayyiz structure. So ya tali'an jabalan. If it's nakira also, and it's said by someone like a blind man, then it's also mansub. Ya rajulan khudh biyadi, oh man, take my hand. And we also said that if it's we also said that you're allowed to contract the last few letters, so you could shorten the word. So instead of saying ya mansur, you can say ya mansu, and the vowel of this can be a rafa, halatul rafa, a dhamma, in terms of halatul rafa, or it can be the vowel what was there anyway. So for Uthman it will be ya uthmu or ya uthma, etc. And today we will start by discussing maf'ul fihi. Maf'ul fihi is the noun which expresses the time or place where the action occurs, where or when the action occurs. It's called a dharf, so it's an adverbial noun. It's also halatun nasab, so depending on what type of word is it mufrad, munsarif, sahih. That means that it's singular and doesn't have a waw or ya at the end of it, as we already went over. Then it would be represented by a dhamma in halatul rafa and a fatha in halatul nasab. So a maf'ul fihi, if it's mufrad munsarif sahih, if it's a singular word which doesn't have a halat or halfa illat at the end, then it will be represented by a nasab, a fatha, if it's a maf'ul fihi. So similarly, if it's a dual word, then it will be represented by a ya preceded by a fatha. If it's a plural word, it will be represented by a ya as well, but preceded by a kasra. And there are two types of dharf. One is dharf zaman and dharf makan, and each of these are divided into two categories as well. So dharf zaman just means an adverbial noun regarding time. So zaman just means time. So it's going to describe the time when the verb took place. And there's two types because there's two ways of qualifying time. You can either say a period. The time frame could either be unspecified, like dahr. So, for example, I could say sumtu dahran. I fasted for a certain amount of time. So that's known as mubham. So I'm not qualifying or specifying the exact amount of time that I fasted for. I'm just specifying that I'm just saying that I fasted for a certain amount of time. The second type is mahdud. So I could say sumtu shahran or safartu shahran. I fasted for a month or I traveled for a month, and a month is a specific amount of time. What our focus here is the word shahran, and this is a mufrad munsarif sahih word. So it's represented by a fatha in halat al-nasab. So you'll know how I said shahran, the sound. So this is a restricted and a specific time, as the zaman mahdud, as they call it, and they're all mansub. So dharf when it is zaman will always be mansub. if you and they have the meaning of harf jar within them. So harf jar of the harf jar of fi within them. The harf jar fi means in literally, but you don't have to translate it as in when you're speaking the English language. Sometimes you could say he walked on the earth, like he traveled siru fil earth, means travel on the earth. Because we don't travel inside the earth. If you think of the earth as the ground, we travel upon it, but it's still referring to a place. Obviously, that was an example of Zarf Makan. Zarf Zaman has the meaning of in this specific time frame. So I traveled for I traveled in a period of a month. Of course, it's not always you won't always translate it word to word when you're doing it in English, because in English has its own grammatical structure. So you won't say I traveled in a month. You'll say I'll travel for a month. But in Arabic they say I traveled. It's literally translated as I traveled in a month. But like I said, in English we won't say it like that. Then you have Dharf Makan, which also is divided in the same two types. One is Mubham, and this will be Mansub. So we said Mubham is it means unrestricted. So this means that I am describing that or explaining that the verb took place in a place which isn't specific. It's not qualified or defined. So if I said I sat behind you in English, in Arabic it's jalastu khalfaka. Note the fa is halatul rafa, halatul nasab, sorry. So it's a fatha, and a ka, the ka pronoun is just to show, it just means you. So I khalfa is the word jalastu khalfaka, I sat behind you. So it doesn't say where exactly behind you I sat. So it's unrestricted. Then you have al makan al mahdud, a restricted place, like jalastu fid dari. So note in this example, jalastu fid dari, I sat in the house, the harf jar actually appears. So when it's a mahdud zarf, a zarf makan, then it's necessary to actually bring the fi harf jar. So that was nice and short. The next type of mansubat we have is maf'ul lahu. Maf'ul lahu just means that it's a noun which expresses the reason why the verb before it happened. And so you want to explain why you did a certain thing. Like so here there's a common example. قعدت عن الحرب جبنا. I sat out from the war out of cowardice. So that's how you normally translate it. Jubunan, out of cowardice. So because of my cowardliness, due to cowardliness, so I sat out from the war out of cowardice. A more simple example is darabtuhu ta'diban. Notice the ban at the end of the word ta'dib. This shows that the word is halatun nasab because it's a sahih word and it's singular, and it is represented in the halatun nasab state with fatha. So ta'diban shows that this word is mansub. And what kind of mansub is it? Well, you read that and you say darabtuhu ta'diban. Ta'dib isn't in the same meaning as daraba, so it can't be maf'ul mutlaq. Ta'dib doesn't refer to a time and place, it means discipline. Or yes, it means discipline or manners or etiquettes. So it's not used as a time or space. It's not used as a maf'ul bihi, because who dhamir darabtuhu, you notice the pronoun in darabtu, after darabtu, the who is an attached pronoun, objective pronoun, dhamir mansub muttasil. Therefore the ta'diban is not the maf'ul bihi. So and it makes sense to make it maf'ul lahu, which means an explanation for why the verb or action occurred. So we say darabtuhu ta'diban means I hit him, but for manners. I hit him for manners. Lit ta'dibi, you could say that means lam harf jar. You could assume that's there. So yes, you can assume that when there is maf'ul lahu, then you can estimate that there's a lam there, a lam which is used for explanation. That was another short one. The next one is maf'ul ma'ahu, which is literally just a noun that occurs after a waw. A waw in Arabic is a particle wa. You read it with a fatha, and it just means and. So you could, and a noun occurs after it when waw is in the meaning of ma'a, which means with. Then it will share in the governance of the verb. So it means that there's a word which comes after a verb, and usually this word is either a maf'ul bihi or a fa'il. And after this noun, after this maf'ul bihi, you could say, like for example, ja al bardu, like the cold word, the cold came. And then so that's a fa'il. Ja'a is the verb, which means to arrive, to come, and al bardu is the ismu fa'il, is the subject, which means coldness. So coldness arrived, and wow here were, it means and or with, and it's occurring after a noun preceded by a verb. So now it gives us a hint that the next word could possibly be a mansub, and we have the word jubbati, which just means jackets. So you say the cold came with jackets. Ja al bardu wal jubbati, or jitu ana wa zaydan. So this is these ana is ismu fa'il again. It's just there to express the dhamir in jitu, and wa is once again is in this example. So it braces us for the word to come after it, which we could guess would be a mansub word, and it will have them, and it will be in the it will be used to associate the noun that follows the waw with the verb that came before. So Zaydan is now associated with Jittu. So I arrived with Zayd. So you'll note how the particle wa can mean and I've also translated it here as the word as with. So how do we know how to translate it? Then there's 4 possible scenarios depending on how you're translating the wa. So is this wa being used as atf, right? Which basically means opposition. Literally just means that you're showing that two things are sharing this sharing something, maybe an action or generally an action. So if the verb is actually there in it's spoken, it's lafdhan, which just means you could translate it as concrete, but really it's better to translate it as it's there in words. So if there's it's there actually, you can actually see the verb in a sentence. You'll remember that sometimes verbs are hidden. So then there will be ma'nawiyan or ma'nan or taqdiran. But in this scenario, in the first scenario, if the verb is actually present in the sentence and it's permissible to do atf, it's permissible to use the meaning and, then you can read the noun marfu or mansub. So you could say jitu ana wa sa'idun or sa'idan. Both are permissible. So just to clarify, what do we mean by atf being permissible? It's not permissible to do atf on a attached pronoun. Attached pronouns are like jitu, the tu in jitu. Jitu, which comes from ja'a, which means to arrive. And when you want to say I arrived, then you'll add an attached pronoun onto it, specifically tu. So you'll say jitu. So jitu contains an attached pronoun, and it's not permissible to do atf on an attached pronoun unless you bring another pronoun which is in the same meaning between between the verb, the ma'tuf alayh and the ma'tuf. So ma'tuf alayh just means that which is being opposited to, and ma'tuf bihi is through which that which is being opposited. Similarly, you can't do atf on a dhamir muttasil when it's in the state of jar, except if you repeat the amil, so you'll give the pronoun the jar state as well. At any rate, if you can't do atf, then you have to read it mansub. For example, jitu wa sa'idan, right? In the example jitu wa sa'idan, or jitu wa sa'idan, then you have to read it mansub, because it's not permissible to do atf in this situation, because the the pronoun tu is not separated but with the ma'tuf alayh. Ma'tuf alayh just means the word that comes after wa. It's they're not separated through another pronoun, another word. Uh, so if the verb is only there in meaning, and so it's only there in meaning, that so it's abstract, and it's permissible to do atf, then you read it based on the atf. So what's the ruling of atf? So the ruling of atf is that the ma'tuf alayh, the word that comes after wa, will have the same vowel or the same case as the word that came before wa. For example, ma li zaydin wa amrin, you'll notice that li zaydin is in the majroor state because of lam harf jar before it, which we'll discuss after mansubat. So ma li zaydin, and wa comes after it, and here it's permissible to do atf, and there is no verb that's present in the sentence, so therefore you'll read the word that comes after wa in accordance to the atf, in accordance to the word before wa. So it'll be mali zaydin wa amrin. If it's not permissible to do atf, then you have to read a nasab. We've already mentioned that, and that is maf'ul ma'ahu. So hopefully that was clear, and we will the next noun which will be mansub is hal. So we'll quickly discuss this. So it's just a noun which expresses the condition of the subject, so the doer of an action, the fa'il, or the object, the maf'ul bihi, or it describes and expresses both of their condition, what state they're in, how they're occurring. So a verb occurred, so an action happened in a specific state. So a person came to you standing, or he came to you crawling, for example. So crawling is expressing the state of the person that's doing the action of coming. So the word governance, the amil for the hal is the verb. So this is just about sentence structure. So if you're trying to break up a sentence and you're trying to determine what impact does each word have in a sentence, then you could say this word here is impacted by the verb, it's related to this verb. So the verb might be present in lafadhan, for example, so it might be spoken. So ra'aytu is a verb which means I saw Zaydan rakiban. Ra'aytu Zaydan rakiban, I saw Zayd whilst he was riding. So Zayd rakiban here is expressing the state of Zayd, which is the maf'ul bihi. Notice how Zaydan is mansub because it has a fatha. So in Zaydan, it's the maf'ul bihi, and rakiban is also halatu rafa because it's the hal. It's describing the state of Zayd when I saw him. Or the verb might not be there, it might not be spoken, it's just assumed. For example, Zaydun fi dari qa'iman. So it means Zaydun istiqarra fi dari. Remember we discussed when when zarf is there, then it really means istiqarra. So Zaydun istiqarra fi dari. Zaydun fi dari qa'iman means Zayd is in the house standing. So, and it means I'm informing the person, the addressed person, and indicating to him that Zayd is standing. Sometimes the amil or the word governance is omitted when there is an indication. For example, saliman ghaniman. It's just an Arabic saying which just means return safe and sound. And of course, it's trying to say you return safe and sound. So the word in saliman ghaniman, the word return isn't present there. It's not spoken there. You can't hear it or see it. So as you just say saliman ghaniman. And it's obvious because of the situation when someone's leaving and you tell them in peace, or you don't have to say return in peace. So interestingly, hal is always nakira. That means it's indefinite. So most cases you'll have a tanween. Or if it's a dual word, it'll carry a noon. If it's a plural word, the noon will still be there, they won't be dropped. So the dhul hal, the word whose state is being described, is usually ma'rifah. Like for example, ra'aytu Zaydan. Zaydan is a definite noun. It's a it's a proper name. The Zul Hal can sometimes be nakira, but if it is nakira, the Dhul Hal, remember, is the word that's being described in terms of its condition, then the Hal will always be before it. For example, Ja'ani rakiban rajulun. So rakiban in this situation is the Hal, and it preceded rajulun, which is the Dhul Hal. So a man came to me whilst riding. So the aman is brought at the end of the sentence to prevent confusion between hal and mawsuf sifat in the mansub state. For example, if I said ra'aytu rajulan rakiban, then here it could mean I saw a riding man. So that's it might create, it doesn't explain how it doesn't explain the action in relation to, it doesn't explain the state of the man during the action. It does describe it. Obviously, it's mawsuf sifat. It's an adjective, so it shows I saw a riding man. But what I'm trying to say, I saw a man whilst he was riding. It has a slightly different meaning, right? It shows the condition of the object whilst being observed, whilst an action was being done upon it. So hal can also be a sentence, a nounal sentence, ismi or fi'li, a verbal sentence. For example, رأيت سعيدا يركب فرسه. I saw Sa'id whilst riding his horse. Or جاءني زيد وغلامه راكب. So Zaid arrived or came to me whilst his servant was riding. So the first one, رأيت سعيدا يركب فرسه, is a verbal sentence. يركب فرسه. And وغلامه راكب is a noun sentence. You'll notice that there's a wow there. جاءني زيد وغلامه راكب. So if you see a word like that after an object or a subject of a verb, and there's a sentence that follows that wow, then that sentence is normally the hal. And obviously we won't, those individual words will their vowel signs will be determined based on their position in the sentence. But once you describe the entire sentence by itself will be described as halatul nasab. Hopefully that made sense. Inshallah, we'll continue with mansubat next time. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.